We had a grower in Illinois about 100 miles away from our facility, just knock it out of the park. They showed me and all the rest of us how to farm it. I mean, I learned more from this father-son operation and they did 50 acres and they chose the price per pound option and they made more money than they could make with corn and soybeans.
That's Rich Selby from Tiber Fiber in St. Louis, Missouri. This is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock, and today we're talking to Rich Selby and James Forbes from Tiber Fiber. They're going to tell us all about their hemp processing company, how they work with farmers, what the facilities are like, their output capacity, what they make, all that stuff, plus the challenges and successes that they've met along the way. But first, a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you in part by Impactful Ventures, an investment and incubation company focused on supporting startups and other initiatives that play a vital role in mitigating the adverse effects of climate change. At Impactful Ventures, they strive to amplify enterprises that bring innovative, green opportunities to the forefront and empower those making a significant impact for a sustainable future. You can learn more at impactfulventures.org. This episode is brought to you in part by I&D Hemp in Fort Benton, Montana, where they believe in the goodness of hemp. I&D Hemp is a family-owned, mission-driven, and environmentally focused industrial hemp food, feed, and fiber company, providing new opportunities for farmers and rural communities. Their mission is to provide innovative agricultural products and services to connect American farmers with the pioneers and businesses that see hemp as a way to bring real and lasting change to our communities and planet. Learn more at indhemp.com. All right, welcome back to the show. Here we are. This is episode 4 of season 3. We're sort of smack dab in the middle of February 2023, so happy Valentine's Day, etc. Just wanted to mention a couple of things here before we get into my conversation with the guys from Tiber Fiber. So, you know, I like to hear from listeners, and I have heard from a few of you lately. And so Alex, a listener here in Pennsylvania, he writes to me, he says, listening to your recent shows, it's nice to have you back, but you're mistaken on the amount of times needed to take the FBI fingerprints. It's every 3 years, and it's probably the least of the ass pains involved. All right, thank you for that, Alex. I appreciate the correction. And yes, here in Pennsylvania, that background check is good for 3 years. And I'm assuming it's the same in other states, but I'm looking into that. I also heard from a listener up in Montreal, Canada, by the name of Ezra. He's a photographer and filmmaker, and he's been working on a project called Hemp for the Homeless. So I'm going to be reaching out to him to find out more about that. But he also wrote to say that he wanted to tell me how cool the podcast is, and also that the Chat GPT hemp poem that I read a couple of weeks ago in the style of Wordsworth was brilliant. Well, thank you for the kind words, Ezra, and we'll talk soon about your Hemp for the Homeless project. So, do you have any nuggets of hemp news or maybe hemp events that you would like to share with our audience? Please send them my way. You can always email me at podcast@lancasterfarming.com. All right, so let's get on with our main event here today, talking to the guys from Tiber Fiber. James Forbes and Richard Selby from Tiber Fiber. Welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. How are you guys doing?
Doing good.
Great to be here. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. So I wonder first, let's start with just like a general introduction to Tiber Fiber, and then I'll have each of you introduce yourselves and what you do at the company. So who wants to start? Who can give me like the elevator pitch? Like what is Tiber Fiber?
Take it away, James.
Tiber Fiber is a hemp fiber processing company. We have a unique symbiotic relationship with our farmers in which we extend grower contracts and agreements along with seed stock and agronomy support to ensure that our farmers here in the Midwest are successful in growing the crop that we need to feed our hemp fiber processing plant. And with our hemp fiber processing plant, it's pretty much all of a cotton gin and a timber pulping mill having a child, and that's what we do.
All right.
And then beyond that, we make what we think is amongst the highest volume, highest quality hemp hurd and hemp fiber products in the country.
All right, cool. We'll get into that in a little bit. So what are your roles? So James, you go first. What's your role at the company?
Oh man, title is co-founder and chief operations officer. What I do is one of the 5.5 people that work the processing line daily, handle a portion of our farmer support and agronomy outreach components of the company, continue to by default be the sales force of the company, and sweep the floors, unclog some stuff, like make some phone calls, do some outreach to let people know that we're still in business and operating, a little bit of everything.
Right, whatever it takes, right? And Rich, how about you? Could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I've been in agronomy and farming almost all of my life in 70 different countries, actually, from Iowa, born and raised. And um, I I do, I guess I will, along with James, manage the agronomy program. So um, I'm mostly on the um, what crop inputs, how you plant it, how you space it, that in the seed genetics part. And then, James knows a lot more about cannabis than I do, the cannabis family. And so I do that. And then on another role, I manage the financials, the bookkeeping, the treasury for Tiger Fiber, the insurance, all the making sure everything gets paid
Okay.
and income is received. So
All right. Well, first, describe to me the facility. Like, where are you, and then like sort of what does the facility look like?
So we have two locations. We have one facility in Sauget, Illinois, which is right across the river from the downtown St. Louis Arch. And then we have a second facility in Fenton, Missouri, which is in St. Louis County, about 20 minutes west of the St. Louis Arch. So everything that we have is within a 20-mile loop, including a significant portion of the farming acreage that we contract out.
Okay.
As a visual, the facility, boy, it looks. If you look up, the inside of a cotton gin, it's very similar with different types of equipment, and also with some significant amount of timber classification material. So big, heavy machines, um, forklifts, telehandlers, skid steers, picking up raw bales of hemp. So if you can imagine what a hay farmer does to load and unload their bales, how they handle their material, all of bale spears, bale huggers, and stacking round and square bales. That's what the very front end of our business looks like. Literally, when you come into the building, the side walls are lined with the bales of hemp that we'll process that shift, that day, that week. And then as we get through the first couple of days, we bring more in to get them from our exterior storage outside of the facility so that we're kind of, you know, doing some type of efficiency with how we select bales from and how we run them through. Um, but after that, there's not too many people in the hay industry that would gin their hay. And that's what makes hemp unique is that decortication has been a really popularized term, and everyone says that you need a decorticator. That's We don't have a decorticator. We have a gin that does the multiple different steps to separate the exterior bast fiber for the woody interior core, and that goes through a series of bale breaking, bale shredding, comminution milling, which is when material is traveling at a velocity in a cylindrical force motion to hit itself and separate itself.
Hmm.
That's what our decortication process is: shredding, separating, milling, and then the material then flows into more cleaning and separation equipment, which is just it would be the same as, I guess, like in cotton, separating the stem, sticks, and seed from cotton, and then having the cotton seed go off for what we wear in clothes. It's just flipped. Hemp is like 80% cotton fiber, 20% cotton fiber, 80% the wood, sticks, and trash. And so those streams we then separate and classify. For the time being, the fiber comes out relatively clean, in a pretty, uniform, dedusted bale, continuing to work on other value-added streams to further clean, refine, and package the product. The herd goes through another series of cleaning and sifting processes to make sure that what builder grade hemp ought to look like and be like mimics a lot of the French product.
Sure.
And then the bedding product comes off of that builder grade product because it's smaller and has a little bit more fiber in it.
Okay.
And then out of that bedding product, we separate the fines and the dust, the stuff that would impact the respiratory system of animals that are living in the environment. And that's kind of, what it looks like in there.
Okay. How did you decide to go like the ginning route instead of the decortication route?
We started with the decorticator in 2019.
Yeah.
And realized there was no way to run a business with what was available on the market, and how just mechanically separating the stalks and it wasn't enough if there was no cleaning or refinement.
Right.
You essentially just got smaller pieces of the stalk that don't have either of the qualities or performance that end users want from a natural fiber or a source of cellulosic lignin hemp herd. So that's where our mentality was with you can't just start with the cortication and visual experience. We had spent so much time, thanks through funding through the Missouri Department of Agriculture, getting exposure to what they were doing in Canada and then in Europe. And the folks doing it at scale in Canada and Europe don't have a decorticator. They have processing lines because the material goes through a series of process in a line to get the desired outcome.
Okay.
I don't think there's too many companies on the planet that process hemp the same. And that's probably why not too many companies on the planet have their same styles of equipment line. They've worked, from finished product all the way to the, genesis of this is the equipment we need for this finished product. And so, that's why it's a processing line and not a decorticator.
Okay.
And everybody was looking for the magic decorticator back in 2018 and 2019, and that was a lesson we learned. There is no such thing as a magic decorticator. There's no holy grail of decortication. As James said, it's a 13 or 14 step process.
Right. Okay. Well, let's talk about the sort of like the capacity. Like, how much can you run through, or how much what's your output at this point?
So we say on average 3 to 4 tons per the hour. It could be more than that. It could be less than that. Those are some things that we're continuing to work on efficiencies for, because it's less what the equipment can do. It's more on what the people around the equipment can do to feed the gin. Our bales come in different shapes, different sizes, different densities. Our bale breaking process is kind of luck of the draw. No bale that we have on its own will just fit through the equipment line. It's it would be trying to golf ball through garden hose. It's just not going to fit. So you have to break the material down, and everyone in some form of hemp fiber processing is sizing their initial raw bales down, because we don't have the uniformity that a lot of other, further advanced countries like Canada and the European nations, they've been doing this for 20 years. And so the farmers know, get this equipment, grow this way, bale like this. We're in year like 4 of America's, commercialization. And so round bales, square bales, big bales, short bales, piles of material and bulk bags. That's what we get.
Okay.
And so however fast you can get the bale size and started through the equipment line determines whether or not you're doing 1 ton per the hour or 5 tons per the
Right.
hour. So
Okay.
on average, we're around 3, 4 on our best days. Just being realistic.
Okay. I want to hear about, how you work with farmers, but first, can you tell me about like the output? Like what products are you making, and then who's buying those?
Um, as far as products that we're making, I guess what we're making is essentially 4, kind of 5 things. We make decorticated, clean, and dedusted bast fiber at a spec size of 1 to 3 inches in length, less than 5% herd, debris, dust. That's one product. The other three, maybe four, we have a builder grade spec hemp herd that was designed to be on par with the European quality hemp herd for hemp lime, hempcrete construction. Um, it's really tough to put that word out there, hempcrete, anymore because so many people use it so differently. But it's the hemp herd if you want to build stuff. It's been designed to have that half-inch, quarter-inch average length. It is dedusted, and we run it through a number of different additional cleaning steps to get the fiber out, to allow for the surface area, porosity, and overall ratios that folks are currently demanding. This could all change, as more advancements in hemp building come online. But right now, that's the number one thing that we produce and sell and is in demand because of the sheer volume of hemp building projects going across the country. We're proud corporate sponsors of the U.S. Hemp Building Association. And so, as one of the few hemp fiber processors in America that has the ability to have infinitely less freight costs added on to, hemp herd, we're pretty popular in that vertical.
Yeah.
And then, we make a second grade of herd that is it's marketed and advertised as an animal bedding product. It's also just an overall good absorbent.
Mhm.
Some other folks prefer that smaller, denser size with a little bit of fiber in it for some building applications. Um, the third product is essentially our hemp vines. We trademarked the name Sure Can because it sure can absorb everything. Um, but it's beyond a spill absorbent. That's what we call it. The highest demand from it has been through um, compounding manufacturers that take stuff, size it down, and blend it with other things to make biocomposites and bioplastics.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So right, because our builder grade is pretty big in comparison to the smallest size,
Mhm.
and the bedding does have, like some big pieces, and it's got some fiber in it. The fines are another dedusted, no fiber product. It's just it was lab tested at 900 microns, so that's what we call it. We don't do micronizing, but we're at a 900 micron spec size. And if not, auto service shops or schools or people that just want to keep otherwise a bag of Zephyr oil dry in the garage, it's
All
a
right.
spill absorbent.
Yeah.
The highest demand, actually the highest demand we have, but we just can't produce it, is for plastic compounding. And that spec and that size is typically the one that's almost always default, the one requested, because we send samples of everything that we produce.
Mhm.
And it's always, well, the smaller one is the easiest one for us to size down in a single pass for efficiency. How much of this can you get? And it's always sizable numbers. It's just the farming isn't there yet.
Right. So you would say that like the demand is greater than the supply at this point.
Oh, absolutely. We can't
Yeah.
even supply all the hemp home projects we get requested for right now.
Yeah. Okay. Can you talk about some of those building projects? Like, they're out there in the Midwest building some hemp houses?
Oh yeah, quite a few. There's a good amount of folks just here in Missouri, but there's groups popping up and reaching out from Colorado, Texas, Arkansas, Tennessee, now Illinois. We're building 2 hemp homes with our precast prefabricated wall systems here in St. Louis in partnership with another group I work with on addressing vacancy and affordable housing. Um, and yeah, just as many hits as we get either through social media, the website, or however people we'll get our personal cell phone numbers. We get requests for
People just call you up.
yeah, like, hey, I tried calling this person, this person, this person, this person, found you on however I found you, Google, or someone said, hey, check these guys out on Instagram. Will you sell us hemp herd anytime this year? And it's, yeah, we will. And then it's like, well, I need 12 tons, 14, 15 tons of the material. And it's like, that's over a truckload. So we'll get to you as soon as we get to the other people in front of the line. Because we're not that far behind, but it really is, with the holidays, and we just got our bagging line set up in November. It's been, a catch-up game.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about the farmers that you have. Like, you contract with local farmers, and are you bringing in more to meet that demand?
Yeah, and that's a tricky. Yeah, go ahead, James.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that since we got started, we've been working with a pretty diverse group of growers, predominantly here in Missouri, now in Illinois with the Illinois Hemp Growers Association. But we developed and Rich can elaborate more on this. He drafted the contracts up, but put together grower agreements that were fair on both sides, so that we can continue to have year over year repeat growers and not one guy tries to grow 100 acres, it doesn't work out, and then no one in the county wants to grow hemp ever again. But yeah, Rich, if you want to touch on that one, that's your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
It's not easy because farmer, and growers in our area, they're used to making money on the corn and soybean rotation with occasional milo or wheat switch in depending. And to approach a group of farmers and talk about industrial hemp is challenging to say the least. They're interested in it. So there's three ways that we can approach a contract. One is like a grower agreement that's like on a cost plus level where we want that grower to hit a minimum harvest. Like if we pay them up front and they lose the crop, we won't pay all up front, right? But what we really like, and then of course we have a price per pound. We had a grower in Illinois, about 100 miles away from our facility, just knock it out of the park. They showed me and all the rest of us how to farm it. Nice. I mean, I learned more from this father-son operation and they did 50 acres. And they chose the price per pound option, and they made more money than they could make with corn and soybeans.
Wow.
And then the third thing that I think really might be the best model. Oh, okay.
Before we get to that third thing, I want to hear more about these guys. Like, what were they doing? Like, what was the secret there?
They were, they had good soil to start with. I mean, they had, it's West Central Illinois, and you have black soil, and you have great humus content and nutrient use. And from a conventional basis, I told them that we always want to go no-till, but if we have soil compaction, we can't. And in this situation, we had to kind of carve up the soil down to 12-inch depth through disking and plowing, and then the weed management. The good thing about industrial hemp is you don't have to use near the amount of pesticides as you do with soybeans and corn. And so I don't really worry about Johnson grass popping up. But what we did together is I gave them a seeding rate of about 55 pounds an acre, and they drilled it at like a quarter to a third inch depth. And this is after burn down with very basic chemicals, not a lot of active ingredient, just contact chemicals. And then the next day they planted the seed, and we got germination about 10 days later. And then they were a little worried about rain. They were taking pictures and sending them to me, and they got over 4 tons an acre at the end.
Wow.
But the hard part, the two hard parts about this were the state of Illinois required that we drive through the field and test every acre. And if you can imagine, when you have a 12 to 15 foot tall field, like a jungle, we drove a Ford F-150 at 5:30 in the morning with the crop inspector and took samples on every single acre.
Wow.
And I had to pay personally to power wash the guy's truck and clean out the bottom and and just make sure that they're happy. and then one field tested just right at 0.3. And so I went to the state of Illinois and I said, what's the remediation process if we're hot? he goes, well, just bring the inspector down and test the bales. And I'm like, well, why didn't we just start with testing the bales? So,
Right.
but it was great. The state of Illinois is awesome. The hemp department there, Jerred Garlish, and so we worked it out. The other challenge isn't so much planting or drill. You have to have a good calibration on your seed drill and your planter, and make sure you plant the way we want you to for success, and make sure you have nutrients and water.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest challenge is baling, because a lot of the baling systems aren't designed. You have to have a real sharp sickle bar or a disc mower. So they did great on the mowing in Illinois and in Missouri. The baling, we had to put a hemp kit on a McHale baler after raking and retting.
Okay.
And then, but it turned out fantastic. I mean, it was like 4.23 tons an acre for the first year these guys had ever seen hemp.
Wow, that's awesome.
But I would never ask a farmer to, hey, why don't you just stick in 300 acres this year? I want them to try 30 first or
right.
20.
You got to start small. Explain that hemp kit that they put on the baler. What's that about?
Yeah, it's a modified kit. I think what it does is it helps the hemp stock after retting to wrap into to not. I think it's a more intensified bale wrap.
Okay.
Not the wrap on the outside, but wrapping the bale into a round baler.
Right.
And so it's I think McHale, we had, and I'm not sure how, it was a little bit of an expense, but it did great. But the lesson I want to kind of bring, and it's a hard one, because 93% of the United States and Canada still bale on round bales. I would like to, one of these days, I think the large square bales are going to be more efficient in the end.
Oh, that's interesting.
You have that cut knife. And the only thing I don't like about square bales is if they're left in the field, the rain will fall on it and go into the center a little bit. But, rain doesn't really bother us. We'd like to have the bale at 15% moisture at field level. And usually we do that. But I think the big squares are the way to go, because they just cut down on the transportation costs.
Okay.
And it's easier to bale.
Right.
But but square balers are more expensive. They can run 70 to 110,000, even used, or pretty expensive. But the third thing I was going to talk about is, I think the best way to do what we're talking about internally as a company is to approach growers or family farms that usually rent out their ground to other farmers, and pay them a little bit more. And we have 2 baling crews that we know and trust right now that can do this. And we would just take it on ourselves, and then maybe hire that farmer on a cost basis to go ahead and plant according to and then rent the ground, and then have the baling crew come back in, and then they know what they're doing.
Right. Okay, that's a good idea. So a bunch of stuff there I want to dig in on. So will they let you just test the bales now? Like, you don't have to test every acre in the field?
It kind of depends on the state.
Yeah.
Missouri is different than Illinois.
Okay.
I believe we're reaching an agreement. I've been talking with the Illinois Department of Agriculture on a weekly basis about it, and I think they understand what they do. And so I'm confident that this year we'll be able to just test at bale level, because they trust us now. They came out. I mean, the inspector came out and saw the field twice, and so
right. It's just
I'm confident that we're going to reach an agreement there.
Such an unnecessary expense, right? To have to test every acre. You just say you're growing like 50 acres. Like, those tests aren't cheap. It just adds to your cost of production, and the THC level doesn't matter, right?
Yeah,
it's truly been what has held back the U.S.'s I can say fiber production for sure, because it's a pretty easy sell for us to a farmer up front when it's 90, 100-day crop. You'll on average profit $200 to $300 more than if you were growing corn or soybeans, and will guarantee the payout at the end, and make arrangements in the event that something goes wrong and you do need help with the mowing, retting, raking, baling, and transportation. And on case by case basis, we've covered those expenses and made arrangements to make sure that we get the hemp out of the ground every year, because we also provide the seeds up front to no cost to the farmer. I say all that because it sounds like a good deal until it's all right, so you're, a farmer more often than not from a rural community, and the thought of having to go get FBI finger background checked or whatever just isn't your cup of tea already.
Yeah.
And then when you do the math on the testing, um, it's like, well, so no matter what, I can get at least two tests, but if I'm declaring that I'm growing for fiber and you can come out and inspect the field anytime and you can physically see, what the harvest is, can we not just still keep the USDA rule tested at whatever you want? It could be point 0.3 still if they don't decide to change that law. But if it's just the bale of fiber, it's going to test under, point 0.3 or point 0.0 almost
Right.
every time.
So it sounds like you're talking about the exemption, right? That's what there's a lot of movement now to get that exemption language into the next farm bill to make it easier for fiber and grain growers to just grow it, right? Like
That's optimistic that it passes. I mean,
I'm an optimist.
me too, but I mean, also being pragmatic, it's like, well, if there's tools in the legislature right now that you could
Mm.
test, if you redefine what harvest is, which I know in Missouri, it's when you take the bale off of the farmer's land, that's when the harvest is completed. If, it was all right, test all of these bales, or test some bales or sample some bales, or yeah, it would be so much easier to test it bale because to go through essentially a jungle of like thick, sticky bamboo
Right.
and have to reach up and try and do triangular, like sampling. Um, at most we're getting, like God, like maybe 10 bales an acre. So was it not easier just to line all the bales up and just test them?
Right. Right.
You could leave them in the field even, it'd be easier.
Are you chopping before it goes to flour?
More often than not, we try to.
Yeah. Yeah.
90 to 100 days has been our suggested harvest window because we've been overwhelmingly growing the Jinma variety, which is known to exceed the point 0.3 THC limit with induced stress.
Yeah.
And a good way to induce stress is to be 100 degrees, for multiple weeks in a row with no rain,
Mm.
and then an inch of rain all at once happens. That's so we've even gone to the lengths now to pay for pre-testing. We did that this past year just because we didn't want anyone to risk going over.
Right.
We weren't, I wasn't informed that there was a retest approved by the USDA because we had some yields that got sacrificed because when we tested, at day 60, it was already at point 0.2.
Mm.
And so it was,
Right.
we better hurry up and test and
Yeah.
get it and passed and inspected and then harvested right away. Because had we known that you could have retested, we might have just said, well, let the plants go another month and pack on some more tonnage for the acre.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, again, like if it's just do one test, that it's still a sizable amount of money just for one test for a farmer when they break down, every acre input cost. And I
Yeah.
mean, their biggest expense right now is fertilizer, and that's in the hundreds of dollars. Well,
Mm.
when you add an additional hundreds of dollars for
For testing.
hemp and the
Yeah.
challenge of, I'm only growing 40 acres out of 1,000. I got to do all this extra work and drive all the way to this field on this
Yeah.
other section. And yeah, it's been stymieing the industry. And I mean, practically, if it was just a national movement to, again, I can't speak for what needs to happen in the floral, medicinal, therapeutic side. I can't.
No, I mean, for me, I'm not interested in that. I mean, I think all of that medicinal stuff is wonderful, and I'm glad people are doing it. But like, my interest is in the industrial applications of the cannabis plant, so the fiber and the grain. And I think we just need to make it easier for the farmers to grow it. Like, just let's get out of the way and make it easy for them.
Right. I mean, I know this is nationally broadcasted, but all I was getting to is like agree to agree, take the CBD side and all things with it and put that in a box. That is totally separate than what we're talking about with fiber. Then go back to the grain side. I mean, one of the biggest supporters of grain. I wish there were grain farmers all around us so that we can get their stocks too.
Right. Right.
And someone helps split the cost of the agronomy. But again, like those have to go all the way to maturity, and if it's to be ingested, there's the potential that some cannabinoids could have some effect. I don't want to get into the literal weeds with that one, but we're making hemp hurd and hemp fiber, no flower material. For unless we target it, we're not getting to the seed phase. So we're just getting, like 12 plus foot tall stalks with a couple of fan leaves that fall off once
Right.
we cut them down anyway. So
Yeah.
I think ours is a real simple one. I speak on this often that to me, hemp is closer to an aspen soft pine wood tree than it is cotton or tomatoes, which is where it gets confused a lot. It's a very it's kind of like an apple tree. It produces a fruit and some flowers, but I mean, you can still use cherry wood for a lot of stuff and apple wood for a lot of stuff. And hemp is just more in that family.
Mhm.
And we're not even trying to harvest the fruit anyway.
Right. Right. Let's get back to the farming. So you mentioned you're growing Jinma exclusively, or pretty much, and you're what, planting at a density of 50 pounds per acre. Do I have that right?
More or less. That
About
sounds right.
Okay. All right. And then how long do you ret it for? I'm not sure what the humidity is like out there, but um,
It's usually it's because of there's several factors. Because of the design of our processing line, we don't need 6 weeks for retting time. 1 to 2 weeks
okay.
um, is usually. So what we'll do is we'll rake it rake it in day 9 after we mow it, and then bale it in day 18.
Okay. You don't like flip it or turn it or anything, or
Yeah, we turn it in
oh,
yeah, we rake it with a power rake. And for any of the farmers out there, please don't use a wheel rake. It's not going to work. Use a hydraulic power rake, or like
okay.
a.
And you say that from experience, huh?
Yes, yes, yes.
And I just want to also like throw in there with that retting period, um, we're in a unique part of the world. We right around our harvest time, which is typically September, there's still plenty of humidity and moisture, and then it rapidly, in October, starts drying out significantly.
Hmm.
So we get a natural condition for
Yeah.
retting. I've been to other parts of the country where they can't ret to save their lives unless they add moisture
Right.
to the process,
Right.
or other parts of the world where precipitation patterns in the fall don't it's not gonna get dry before it freezes. It's like
Right.
rain, 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 snow. And so we're just in a good spot. I mean,
Yeah.
we're lucky to be where we're at because of the soil, climate, like trade wind patterns, soil conditions, and also plenty of moisture. Again, for fiber production,
Yep.
relative humidity during cannabis's vegetative cycle is really needed. I mean, they pump CO2 and humidity into, indoor facilities for veg to speed up the process. So, climate zone 6A, 6B, 7A, we're in a
Right.
good spot.
Yeah. I've got high hopes for the Midwest when it comes to hemp fiber, so I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. Um, let's see here. So how did you get involved in hemp in the first place? Like why why did you want to do this? Aren't there easier ways to to make some money?
Oh man, I mean, Rich and I each have a very unique background in our own origin story, but where I guess Tiger Fiber came to fruition, kind of stemmed from the University of Missouri. I graduated from Mizzou from the College of Ag, Food, and Natural Resources in 2008, and never thought I would actually come back and do anything with the degree, let alone with the university. But Reader's Digest version on myself, I was pursuing some opportunities in just all things legal cannabis. Obviously, medicinal rec and CBD were, being talked about quite a lot in 2016. And so I'm thinking, well, this is awesome. Everyone else in every other state is doing this. Maybe I can reach out to the University of Missouri and see how we could do a little trial, of any hemp in Missouri, just to be told from one of my old counselors. Missouri had adopted 2014 research farm bill legislation, so we couldn't do anything. It was still a Class A felony to
Hmm.
do anything hemp in Missouri. This was still at the time in the country when people were getting hit with multiple life sentences driving CBD flower from Tennessee or Kentucky to Colorado and getting busted in Oklahoma. Those are actual like real things that happen.
Yeah.
I think those guys are not in prison anymore, but I remember that story quite a lot, thinking that this is still silly that it's legal in some other states in small capacity, but I can go to jail for a long time here in Missouri. So started as an advocacy effort to help, the University of Missouri, a group of local farmers, um, come up with ways that we could sensibly do this in Missouri. And through that connection, they said, yes, we would love to help you. We had made some progress with the Missouri legislature talking about row cropping and how we're not talking about psychoactive cannabis or marijuana, and this isn't a trick. It's something that we want to do on an industrial standpoint. And they had mentioned that a gentleman from a large farm cooperative in Northwest Missouri would like to meet and talk, and it was Rich. And so we got together here in St. Louis and put our heads together, spent a lot of time testifying and advocating in support of the industry alongside a lot of well-known commodity crop farmers here in Missouri and the associations they belong to say that, yeah, there's a rural and urban economic interest that we can realize through this new crop, especially at that time when corn and soybean commodity prices were way down.
Hmm.
And then the Farm Bill passes. We get some grant funds to do some research on how we can take best practices from around the country and around the world and bring them home to Missouri. And that's what led us to realize that the from around the world, our perspective was, of all these industries, the fiber crop has the ability to impact everything that people touch and see. The biggest outlet for offtake, considering that you don't have to make a conscious decision to put that product inside your body. You can wear it, you can sit on it, you can have it in your walls and not even know it's there. So we looked at that because no one else was doing it. We were looking around the country, and everyone that was in the CBD industry and in the food side had gotten just enormous sums of money and resources, and all these headlines are flying, and we're just thinking we're too late to that party, so we'll just be super early to fiber.
There you go.
It's just it's like it's the boat we missed. We missed out on the CBD mega bucks, and then unfortunately corrections happen. The FDA is still doing what they need to do on their end for overseeing the food side of things, and lo and behold, fiber was the one that made the most sense for us here in the Midwest.
Yeah. How about you, Rich? Why did you decide to get involved into this hemp space?
Well, yeah, it's an interesting story. I'll try to, like James said, I'll try to give the Reader's Digest version. So I grew up in Iowa, worked on farms when I was in high school. Family owned some ground. And then I went to the University of Iowa, which is not the ag school at Iowa. And I got a degree in Russian and in business. And then I went to Iowa State as an ag econ graduate student. And that's when the US government found me. Um, and pulled me overseas. And I worked in Moscow for a while. And then I transferred to Minsk, Belarus, where I met my wife and lost all my security clearances. One of my assignments by the US ambassador at the time was to go down and study a crop that would uptake radioactive nuclides in lands damaged by the 1986 Chernobyl nuclear disaster. I have pictures and everything. This is a true story.
Wow.
And so I managed this program, and it was very political and combative. I had people from Los Alamos and the International Atomic Energy Agency and U.S. Department of Agriculture and USAID, everything. So we started growing high erucic acid rapeseed to see if we could make lubricants at where the radioactive where it uptook in the plant. When I left the program in 1995, it was taken over by the IAEA, and they started using industrial hemp, not for the uptake part, but to clean the soil.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of put that in the back of my, my deposit in my brain. And flash forward 30 years later, I moved to Missouri in 2017, and I become board president of United Cooperatives in Northwest Missouri. And then that's when the 2018 Farm Bill comes out, and my board and I said, let's look at this, and then I called a friend who was a professor at the University of Missouri, and that's where I met James.
Okay.
And the rest is history. And then James and Jerred and others said, okay, so let's divvy up the responsibilities. Who wants to be the, president and everything? And I'm just sitting there, and they all look at me and say, you need to keep the books. And I'm like, oh boy, okay. So I went to open up a bank account at Bank of America. It took me 3 weeks to convince them that we're not in CBD or marijuana. And I had to call Charlotte, North Carolina, the headquarters, and have a call with the assistant general counsel to open up the bank account.
Oh,
But
wow.
the rest is history. And I think we're in our 5th year now.
Nice.
We incorporated August 31st, 2018.
Nice. Okay. Well, you mentioned that challenge with the banking. Other challenges that I'm sure it's been a lot of challenges, but can you, maybe talk about a couple of the other insurance? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for the longest time up until like last year, we were classified in the high risk, like excess and surplus lines market because all of the initial hemp insurance was predominantly targeted for CBD, and it's like, oh, how much are you valuing these crops on average? Oh, millions of dollars. Well, that's what we're going to base all of these insurance underwriting risk on. And so when you have the word hemp in your company, even if it's fiber hemp, it's still, oh, great. Yeah, you guys are hemp guys. We know exactly what we're doing. No other insurance company will insure you, but these 4 or 5 that are inexorbitantly expensive will cover you. And so that wasn't a challenge initially, but because we were able to do a lot of education, but prior to this life, I was a partner at an insurance brokerage that was, it's pretty well known around like the region and the country, but I had done a lot of underwriting, and so I filled out a lot of the language that said, we're a fiber, yarn, and thread mill classified by the federal government by what we do. If we don't necessarily have to exclusively do hemp, but with this NAICS code that classifies you as fiber, yarn, thread, which is a pretty broad umbrella, but exactly what we do, we're able to be carried under the standard market. Same with freight. We had to reclassify a lot of our freight codes, and Rich did a lot of this, but we kept getting classified as if we were transporting, like truckloads and bulk bags of flour, and
Yeah.
it's, we're truckloading bulk bags of canned mulch and beige cotton. And so those are still challenges to this day. And why we're so adamant about classifying fiber in a totally different category than the other crops that hemp's known for, because it is grown for its fiber, yarn, and thread, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Is there something that you learned along the way that you wish you knew from the beginning, like some sort of takeaway that people who are maybe not as far along in the process as you are, like what can people learn? Like what maybe mistakes you made that people can learn about? Or
Make sure that before you set up any type of infrastructure, equipment, or decide you want to invest any significant amount of money, make sure on whatever you can afford to lose, you try to grow the crop. I mean, that's the thing, is so many people believe the anecdotal information out there that, oh, hemp is a weed, it'll grow anywhere. And it's like, well, all right, so we got to get all these seeds that are really expensive from places we don't know right away, and we got to get this equipment that we don't know if it's going to work right away, and we got to get out there and start promoting that we're doing this right away and start trying to sell right away, just to finally get the seeds in, try to grow it. It doesn't work, and then everything kind of crumbles. That's the story we've seen in this industry over our years of just being in it. Is we've perpetually thought that we were so far behind everybody, and that we were just lucky that, we're in parts of the country where we don't get a lot of media attention and no one knows what we're doing, just to come to find out that so many people that we thought were light years ahead of us are a little bit behind, or neck and neck. And I'm not, all I'm saying is that for every time that I like hear someone say, "Hey, did you hear about this like company setting up shop and they're going to be in the same industry?" At first I was thinking, "Oh man, we're really behind the eight ball, guys. We're in the hundreds of acres. We, are just now getting started, and yeah, it's been an eye opener that because we had so many challenges getting started, we couldn't, just go crashing, 100 miles per hour into a wall.
All right. How about you, Rich? Something that, yeah.
Definitely agree with James on that. It's a chicken or egg thing. You have to produce it and you have to process, you have to sell it. And I would, recommend that really the farmer education and hopefully someday soon I'll be full time just out with every single farm, every single planting, every single process and living in my pickup truck. You know, you got to do that. You really do. And you have to communicate with the farmers and find those that are not only progressive, but really know how to farm, how to adjust their drill. It doesn't take a lot of equipment changes unless you're going for seed. But do that. And then the second thing is, uh, we learned a lot of lessons on the engineering side. They're all addressable, but we've had some equipment switch outs and things like that. So now that we go to build a second plant, we will know much better the engineering design and what we need and what I really admire about our CEO Jerred Killoren, he's taken that by uh, he's a finance major and all that, but he's an engineer
Yeah.
too. So it's amazing how much he's learned.
Cool.
And how much focus he's put on that.
Right.
So I think all the questions are addressable, or all the challenges.
Yeah.
In the beginning, I thought that we'd have a huge problem transporting seed around the state. Back in 2018, I called the DEA in Kansas City, explained the situation. They gave me a letter from a diversion agent saying, as long as you're not in it's not CBD or marijuana seed, feel free to transport it. And so we drove it all over the state and dropped it off at 7 University of Missouri research stations.
Okay.
I thought that was going to be a big problem.
Yeah.
Now there's just things that are all, I think, solvable.
Okay.
And we're, we want to scale, and that's also.
Yeah. So, how many farmers are you working with this year, and what's your acreage looking like?
Well, we prefer to work with smaller groups. We don't want to work with 80 farmers. We prefer to work with 3 or 4 bigger groups.
Okay.
That really we've worked with in the past, and that's kind of our strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And I would think that budget consideration aside, that I'd like to get up to, I don't know, James, what do you think? 1,800 acres, but 1,000 to 3,000, depending on budget constraints. Because we need the biomass, but we're also buying. What we'll do is we found farmers that have hemp bales, and then we'll say, well, why don't we run one through our system and see if it works? And if it works, we're going to pay you the price per pound, and so that also helps. What do you think, James, about acreage?
No, I'd say that's about right. I mean, I would just like preface just 2 things, is that going back to the lessons that we learned, yeah, definitely getting to know your farmers, if you're a processor, and on the flip side, if you're a farmer, getting to know who's going to buy the crop and sell it to you, or you're going to sell to, is another thing to learn, because geography really does matter where you're going to be doing this. And it's really hard for a group that maybe family farms or market farms, like 100 acres, like 200 acres, to section off, 20, 40, 100 acres of their land for just fiber production if they've never done it before and things aren't dialed in. So it's really a caution. And so the other thing that might help impact our increased acreage is a remediation effort that we're working in partnership with the city of Decatur through some USDA funds to help uptake excessive levels of nitrogen in and around a watershed in central Illinois. And so we did secure a 500-acre plot through the city to do our own in-depth R&D for the sake of what works the most to leach up excess nitrogen fertilizer, but also gives us the presence with some incentivized funding in and around that area that we're hoping to I guess, make a lot of connections between now and the March 31st crop insurance deadline. Working pretty hand in hand with the Illinois Hemp Growers Association.
Was that Rachel Barry's
And
group?
yeah, Rachel's awesome.
Yeah,
Rachel and
He
Chris,
is
yeah.
she's awesome.
No, they've connected us to so many awesome people that we didn't know were even thinking about growing hemp fiber just in our neighboring states. So that's been great. And there's been some other cool considerations that we never thought would be happening so soon in the industry. But there's enough farmers out there that have been doing their own diligence and research, just waiting for a processor to come on board within driving range. But folks willing to, take on a little bit more risk to select and choose their own inputs if we're able to, offer some sort of pre-plant purchase order, which just means, if we say we need 1 million pounds, 10 million pounds, they'll work on their end to produce it. We haven't finalized those terms just yet, but that's another thing that could impact the acres planted, because the barrier we still have is access to seeds to one thing, price of seeds is another, but seeds that we can in good faith look someone in the face and say these will grow in this climate, this soil, this pH,
Yep.
this precipitation pattern. It's a lot of things we don't know, but what we do know is the, like 4, 5, 6 people that will, be our multi-year success stories that have started with us from year one and continued to grow with us. Um, those were farming relationships that worked out where younger generation farmers that if they wanted to could plant 5,000 acres, but they feel comfortable to try 10, 20, 30, 40. And now they're at the point where we have a good rapport relationship. They've done year over year agronomy studies and sampling and third party research efforts, some with some major players like Bayer Crop Sciences and Land O'Lakes. Some folks are really dialed in. Some folks are on boards of directors for, conservation and wildlife departments here in the state. That's why, we can comfortably with certain groups now after several years of working together and also paying everybody, that we know that we can scale some acreage around our facility here in St. Louis. Not too opposed to working with new farmers, but having learned a lot of lessons on the challenge of bale movement and storage. That's something that I think doesn't get talked about in the industry because if we have, like a heavy amount of growers that are 20 miles away from us, but we've got a couple dozen, couple hundred acres, 300, 400 miles away, there's going to be log jams on what we can receive on any given day. And most people are used to leaving their bales outside. If there's a 1 inch rain that then freezes, those bales aren't going to be ready to process for quite some time,
Okay.
and the quality degrades. And so, yeah, those are a lot of the considerations that we have to take on as a company that has a lot of skin in the game. I mean, we truly are very, very, very invested in the success of our farmers because we've already bought, a significant amount of seeds that we have to make sure turn into crops that turn into revenue so that we could reinvest next year, buy more seeds and invest in more acres
Sure.
to grow, so on, so on. So that's where we're at now. We get asked a lot if we can do any more farm production contracts out of the region, and unfortunately, there's only a couple of places that we can afford to do so right now. And so we are looking throughout, eastern Missouri all the way through central Illinois for, folks to have conversations with, to see what we can do this year. But the scale is going to come from existing farm relationships.
Okay. So, what are the plans for the future? Like look ahead for me, the next 5 years, 10 years. What's the growth of Tiger Fiber looking like?
Well, hopefully we find enough acreage being successfully grown year over year to warrant an expansion. We're so symbiotically tied to what the nation does with fiber production in that next 5 years, to dictate what we do. We know our part of the country fairly well, but No, there's a lot of demand in North Carolina. I don't know any farmers or anything about their farming practices other than once upon a time they grew a lot of tobacco. They should be able to grow hemp or, a lot of stuff in Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania. It's like, well, once upon a time they grew something else. Maybe they'll grow hemp. Once we get to the point where there's several thousand acres growing, that would give us the confidence to make the investment in a second facility. But that's where we find ourselves again with that chicken and the egg is who in North Carolina is going to decide to grow 1,000 pounds of hemp with no processor nearby. And I don't mean processor that may come to town one day. I mean, have you talked to someone that is like lined out what their punchline and time frame looks like to get a factory set up? Because I've heard of people growing hemp, not, like not in North Carolina, but in other states that were told they need to grow all this hemp because a processor is going to come in a year just to try and sell us their bales of hemp 2 years later. These are real life stories. And so that's where we hope is that other parts of the country ramp up production and we can be involved with that growth. But what will probably be our trajectory for the next 2 or 3 years is figuring out what expansion looks like 50 miles away from where we're at now, like very similar to grain elevators and cotton gins where they're close by because there's only 6 of us at Tiger Fiber. So I mean, how can like any of us peel away to go set up a brand new facility and I mean myself, Rich, and Jerry would have to essentially move somewhere else for 2 years just to set up another facility, unless there's boots on the ground. Because we're willing to partner. I mean, we don't have to own every single leg of the supply chain, and we one can't and two don't really want to because it's when will we ever live life? But if there's folks out there that want to talk, we're having good conversations in places like Michigan and Alabama where people understand that it's as exciting as it is to be a part of this industry and how much of a demand there feels like. Most farmers have only had 1, 2, 3 times to even practice growing this crop. So let's get some more practice under our belt so we don't have a bunch of people that could have grown any other crop and made any other amount of money that they already were going to make until they decided to gamble and the gamble doesn't pay off. Let's have less of those horror stories and more compounding success stories that talk about USDA reporting hemp fiber acreage slowly going up, not these sharp curves.
Right. Yeah. So tell me about the name and the logo. So I see you with your background there, James, with this very cool looking tiger with a flag. So where'd the name come from?
I used to hesitate to tell the story, but it's been received well enough. So way back into the part of the story where hemp was not legal in Missouri and you can go to prison for being involved in this industry. I was bugging my old professors and counselors from University of Missouri to tell me how, we could get started with this. And they said, well, we can't do any of that stuff that you think is a good idea because if we try, we'll, be at risk of losing significant amounts of funding and you'd be committing Class A felonies. What we can do is put together economic impact studies and let's work together that way. And so walked away from a meeting thinking, okay, great. Like we don't have much, but we have the University of Missouri support. And I'm thinking, boy, I don't want to be always signing in for, like legislative sessions or whatever is just James Forbes private citizen because it is still a felony and it is not cool in Missouri at that time to talk about anything hemp related. If you said hemp, it would just automatically mean you're trying to do recreational marijuana. And Missouri was just not about it at the time, which is weird because now we're a rec state.
Oh,
But
okay.
back then, I'm thinking we need to come up with a name or something because you could file a company online for a couple of bucks and keep yourself separate. And so I'm thinking, oh man, like what are we going to call ourselves? And I'm with a buddy throwing around a bunch of names, and the Wu-Tang Clan song comes on with the beginning that says Tiger Style on it. And I'm thinking, oh, we're in Missouri. We're the Missouri, Tigers. We'll just be, like Tiger style fiber. And then that sounded awful. And then, oh, let's just be Tiger Fiber and not put really hemp in the name. And that way it'll always be Missouri Tiger Fiber is our hemp. So you'll always just go out that way when you sign in for legislative sessions. And the name stick. We had a friend here locally that has some friends that are artists that drafted up our logo. We just recently got it vectorized and digitized so that it's pull and stretchable. But that's where the name came from, an ode to Mizzou and the Wu-Tang Clan.
It all comes back to the Wu-Tang Clan. All right, so where or how can people get in touch with you?
The easiest way is to, like, for the moment, direct message us through social media. It's the fastest way for one of us to feel our phones buzzing and get a note. The probable best way forward would be to email us. If you email me at james@tigerfiberhemp.com, I've blocked off mornings and evenings to respond to as many outreach requests as I can.
Okay.
Yeah, through our website, which is nearing development, you'll be able to actually, I keep forgetting, like, submitting requests to the website is like the surest way that it'll get a response within 72 hours.
Okay, and that's tigerfiberhemp.com.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, I'll put a link to that on the show page for this episode. So, cool. Well, is there anything else you want to tell us about Tiger Fiber before we wrap it up?
Oh man, I think we covered a lot of ground. I mean, the only thing else I could say is again, I'm perpetually optimistic of where the industry is going. We've only been at this for 5 years legally in the US, so I mean,
it's still so early. Yeah.
Yeah, five times for one grower to get enough practice under his belt. So I think in 5 years, as fast as this industry's gone from you could be sitting in prison for doing this in 2017 to now there's federal grants, incentives, and subsidies going directly towards this particular niche of the crop. I bet in 5 years we'll be a lot further along.
Oh yeah. Cheers to that.
Yeah, just a quick plug. And we have, we're invited to speaking engagements. One of them on March 15th will be at the Illinois Department of Agriculture's Hemp Summit. I don't have the details yet, but I know that we are going to be speaking, and hopefully all three of us will be there. So
cool.
All right. And March 10th we'll be expoing at the South by Southwest Music and Arts Festival in Austin with our friends from U.S. Heritage Group, one of the best producers of hemp lime binder that we know of.
Cool.
That is also our partners in the precast, prefabricated hemp wall panel we're developing jointly. And then I think at least one of us for sure is gonna be presenting or speaking in NOCO. So March should be a pretty good time.
Sounds like a busy month. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, it's we used to all be able to go on all the trips, and then this whole factory turned on, and some of us have to work here.
Right. Someone's gotta keep it running,
and
right?
We have to divide and conquer.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll see some of you at NOCO at the end of March. I'll be out there. And it's great to talk to you. Thank you for your time today. It's really excited for what you're doing, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks, Eric. You have an awesome podcast, and you're a great journalist. We appreciate it.
All right, there you go, the guys from Tiger Fiber. You can learn more about what they're doing at their website, tigerfiberhemp.com. All right, so that does it for me today. I hope you enjoyed today's show. My name is Eric Harlock. I am the digital editor at Lancaster Farming Newspaper, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. And just a heads up, I'm going to be moving studios here over the next week or so. So hopefully this won't cause any disruptions in our production schedule. You may hear changes in, the sound quality, but hopefully not. So anyway, just a little peek behind the curtain what's happening here. So like I said earlier, you can always get in touch with me at podcast@lancasterfarming.com. All right, until next time, I will see you in the newspaper.
Industrial hemp.
Season 3, Episode 4 of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2023 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show is written and recorded, edited, and produced by Eric Herlock. The music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.